Hey everyone, Archie here. Today we're going through a movie iceberg about films that feel off. That does not always mean horror, and it does not always mean a giant twist ending. Some of these movies are thrillers, some are dramas, some are surreal art films, some are animated, and some are basically nightmares that happen to get released in theaters. What connects them is that feeling you get while watching them, where the world seems normal at first, then little by little, the movie starts making you question what you are seeing. Basically, it's mindfuck movies. Sometimes the characters are losing their grip on reality. Sometimes the story is built like a dream. Sometimes the editing, the music, the performances, or even the way people talk makes the whole thing feel slightly wrong. You might understand the plot, but the movie still leaves you with that strange feeling afterward, like you just woke up from a dream and you are trying to explain it before it disappears. We're starting with the more popular mind-bending movies at the top, then going deeper into films that become more confusing, uncomfortable, experimental, and harder to sit through. So let's start at the surface. Tier 1. At the top of the iceberg, we have movies that most people have at least heard of. These are mind-bending films, but they still have clear stories, recognizable stars, and endings people can argue about without needing to watch a 4-hour explanation video. The first entry is Inception from 2010. This is one of the biggest mainstream mind-bending movies ever made. The story follows Dom Cobb, a thief who enters people's dreams to steal information, and then gets offered one last job where he has to plant an idea inside someone's mind. The movie builds its dream rules very clearly, with dreams inside dreams, time moving differently on each level, and characters using small objects called totems to check whether they are awake. What makes Inception work so well is that it takes a complicated idea and presents it like a heist movie. There are plans, teams, targets, security systems, and a final mission that keeps cutting between different dream layers. The part people still talk about is the ending, where Cobb spins his top and the movie cuts before we know for sure if it falls. That one image turned the whole movie into a conversation. People walked out asking whether he was awake, whether he was still dreaming, and whether the answer even mattered to Cobb anymore. Next is Shutter Island, also from 2010. This one follows U.S. Marshal Teddy Daniels, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, as he investigates a missing patient at a mental hospital on a remote island. The movie has fog, storms, locked rooms, suspicious doctors, and the feeling that everyone knows something Teddy does not. At first, it plays like a mystery thriller, but as Teddy keeps investigating, his dreams, memories, and trauma start bleeding into the case. The island feels like a place built to trap him, and every conversation seems to push him closer to something he does not want to face. The twist is famous now, but the movie still works because of how carefully it builds Teddy's world. You understand why he is suspicious, and you understand why he keeps pushing forward. By the end, the question becomes less about the missing patient and more about whether a person can survive knowing the truth about themselves. Then we have Donnie Darko from 2001. This is one of those movies that became a cult favorite because it feels like a teenage dream, a science fiction story, and a psychological breakdown all at once. Donnie is a troubled teenager who starts seeing a man in a disturbing rabbit costume named Frank. Frank tells him the world is going to end, and from there the movie gets into sleepwalking, time travel, suburban life, school, family, and the strange loneliness of being young and not feeling like anyone around you understands what is happening inside your head. Donnie Darko has a lot of pieces that people love to analyze, like tangent universes and manipulated living, but the movie's staying power comes from its mood. It captures that feeling of being awake late at night, walking through your own neighborhood, and feeling like the entire world is hiding something from you. Even the music adds to that feeling, especially the ending with Mad World, which helped define the movie's reputation. After that is The Sixth Sense from 1999. This is one of the cleanest twist movies ever made, and it is probably the reason a lot of people became obsessed with twist endings in the first place. The story follows a child psychologist named Malcolm Crowe, played by Bruce Willis, who tries to help a young boy named Cole, who says he can see dead people. The movie is quiet and sad for most of its runtime. Cole is not treated like a horror movie kid who is just there to be creepy. He seems exhausted by what he sees. He is scared, but he is also lonely. The movie's famous ending changes the way you understand everything before it, but what makes it last is the emotional side. It is about fear, communication, and people trying to say the things they could not say while they were alive. A lot of twist movies are fun because they trick you. The Sixth Sense is remembered because the trick comes with real feeling behind it. Next is Fight Club from 1999. This movie follows a nameless narrator who is bored, depressed, unable to sleep, and trapped in a life that feels fake. Then he meets Tyler Durden, who seems like everything he is not. Tyler is confident, reckless, funny, dangerous, and completely free from normal rules. Together, they start an underground fight club that grows into something much bigger and more chaotic. Fight Club became famous for its twist, but it also became famous because so many people argued about what it was saying. Some viewers saw Tyler as cool. Other viewers saw him as a warning sign. The movie feels off because the narrator's life feels off from the very beginning. His apartment, his job, his insomnia, the support groups he attends, all of it has this drained, empty quality. By the time the movie reveals what is really going on, it feels shocking, but it also feels like the truth was sitting there the whole time. The last movie in Tier 1 is Black Swan from 2010. This one follows Nina, a ballet dancer who gets cast as the lead in Swan Lake and starts falling apart under pressure. She wants to be perfect, but the role requires both innocence and darkness, control and freedom, and that split starts eating away at her. The movie uses mirrors, doubles, body horror, and hallucinations to show Nina's mind breaking down. What makes Black Swan easy to connect with is that the fear comes from pressure. Even if you know nothing about ballet, you understand what it feels like to be pushed, judged, watched, and expected to become something you are not sure you can become. The movie keeps everything close to Nina's point of view, so when she starts seeing things, the audience has to sit inside that confusion with her. By the end, the performance and the breakdown become almost the same thing. Tier 2, Something's Not Right. Now we move down a little. These movies are still fairly accessible, but the mood gets heavier. The stories still make sense, but the world feels less stable, and the characters seem like they are walking through a reality that has already started to crack. The first entry is The Machinist from 2004. This movie follows Trevor Resnick, a factory worker who has not slept in a year. Christian Bale famously lost a huge amount of weight for the role, and that physical appearance becomes part of the movie's horror. Trevor looks like a man who is disappearing while still alive. He works around heavy machinery, lives alone, and starts seeing a strange man named Ivan who may or may not be real. The movie slowly becomes a mystery about guilt, memory, and the body's refusal to keep going. What makes The Machinist feel so unsettling is how exhausted everything looks. The colors are cold, Trevor's apartment feels empty, and every interaction has this uncomfortable distance. You can feel that something terrible has been buried, and Trevor's mind is using insomnia like a punishment. Next is Enemy from 2013. This is one of the best "what did I just watch" movies in modern psychological cinema. Jake Gyllenhaal plays Adam, a quiet history professor who discovers an actor who looks exactly like him. He becomes obsessed with finding this double, and the movie turns into a tense, strange story about identity, repetition, fear, and control. Enemy is famous for its spider imagery, especially the ending, which leaves a lot of viewers frozen for a second before they even know how to react. The movie does not explain itself in a simple way, but it gives you enough clues to feel like the answer is somewhere under the surface. The city feels yellow and drained, the characters speak carefully, and everything has this heavy, trapped feeling. It is the kind of movie where even a normal apartment hallway feels wrong. After that is It Follows from 2014. This one is usually described as a horror movie, but it also fits this iceberg because the whole world of the film feels slightly out of time. The premise is about a supernatural force that follows a person slowly, always walking, never running, and it can look like anyone. Once it is passed to you, it keeps coming until you pass it on. What makes It Follows feel off is not just the creature, it is the way the movie refuses to settle into a clear time period. Some things look modern, some things feel old, and the characters live in a version of suburban America that feels familiar but not fully real. The monster walking slowly in the distance is scary, but the empty streets, quiet neighborhoods, and strange stillness are just as important. The movie makes normal space feel unsafe. A sidewalk, a school hallway, a beach, or a bedroom can become threatening because something might already be walking toward you. Next is The Killing of a Sacred Deer from 2017. This movie follows a surgeon named Steven who forms a strange connection with a teenage boy named Martin. As the story develops, Martin reveals that Steven's family is going to suffer unless Steven makes a horrifying choice. The movie is disturbing partly because of the plot, but the thing most people notice is the way everyone talks. The dialogue is flat, formal, and emotionally strange, even when the characters are discussing awful things. People do not react the way you expect them to react. Conversations feel stiff, almost like everyone is pretending to be human. That style can be funny in a very uncomfortable way, but it also makes the whole movie feel cursed. The family home, the hospital, the restaurants, everything looks clean and controlled, while the situation becomes more and more unbearable. Then we have Hereditary from 2018. This is one of the most talked about modern horror films, and it earns its place here because the first half plays like a family tragedy that keeps turning darker. The story follows Annie and her family after the death of Annie's mother, and the movie slowly reveals secrets, resentment, grief, and something supernatural working in the background. Hereditary is brutal because the horror grows out of family pain. The dinner table scene, the silence after the accident, the way the house feels heavy with anger and loss, all of it creates an atmosphere where the supernatural almost feels like it was invited in by grief. The movie does eventually become more openly occult, but the earlier sections are what make it so unsettling. You are watching people who already feel damaged, and then something ancient starts moving through the cracks. The final movie in Tier 2 is Under the Skin from 2013. Scarlett Johansson plays a mysterious woman who drives around Scotland picking up men. At first, the movie gives you very little explanation, but you slowly understand that she is not an ordinary person. The movie uses real hidden camera footage mixed with stage scenes, which gives parts of it an unusual, natural feeling. Then it shifts into abstract images that feel cold and alien. Under the Skin is unsettling because it makes human behavior look strange. Simple conversations, flirting, walking through a mall, driving through streets, all of it seems different when seen through the eyes of someone who does not fully belong here. The movie is quiet, slow, and uncomfortable, and it leaves you thinking about bodies, desire, loneliness, and what it means to look human from the outside. Tier 3, The Strange Middle. Tier 3 is where the movies start slipping away from normal structure. These films still have stories, but they use dreams, identity shifts, unreliable memory, and emotional chaos in ways that make them harder to explain cleanly. First is Mulholland Drive from 2001. This is one of David Lynch's most famous films, and it begins like a mystery about a woman who survives a car crash and loses her memory. She meets Betty, an aspiring actress who has just arrived in Los Angeles, and the two begin investigating who the woman really is. For a while, the movie feels like a strange Hollywood mystery with dreamlike scenes around the edges. Then the film changes, identities shift, names change, relationships change, and the viewer has to rethink everything. Mulholland Drive feels like a dream about Hollywood, desire, failure, jealousy, and the fantasy version of yourself that cannot survive contact with reality. The reason people keep returning to it is because the emotional meaning feels clear even when the plot feels slippery. You may not understand every symbol, but you understand the feeling of wanting a life so badly that your mind builds a dream around it. Next is Lost Highway from 1997. This is another David Lynch film, and it is even colder and more frightening in some ways. The movie begins with a jazz musician named Fred Madison and his wife Renee receiving mysterious videotapes of the outside and then inside of their home. That alone is creepy enough, but the story eventually transforms in a way that feels like reality has broken and replaced itself. One character seems to become another person, the timeline folds in on itself, and the movie refuses to explain the change in a normal way. Lost Highway feels like guilt, jealousy, and fear turning into a new identity. The mystery man, with his pale face and strange smile, is one of the most unsettling figures in Lynch's work because he seems to know things that should be impossible. The movie feels like being trapped in a bad thought that keeps changing shape every time you try to understand it. After that is The Lighthouse from 2019. This movie follows two lighthouse keepers, played by Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, who are stationed together on a remote island in the 1890s. The movie is shot in black and white with a narrow frame, and it quickly makes the island feel like a prison. The two men drink, argue, work, lie, hallucinate, and slowly lose their grip. The language is old-fashioned and theatrical, the weather is awful, and the sound of the foghorn becomes almost maddening. The lighthouse feels off because it traps you in a small space with two men who are already strange before the isolation pushes them further. There are images of mermaids, seabirds, tentacles, and a mysterious light that may represent knowledge, power, madness, or just another thing they cannot have. The movie can be funny, disgusting, and frightening in the same scene, which makes the descent feel even more unstable. Next is Perfect Blue from 1997. This is an animated psychological thriller directed by Satoshi Kon, and it follows Mima, a pop idol who leaves her music group to become an actress. As she tries to change her public image, she starts being stalked, strange events happen around her, and she begins losing track of what is real. Perfect Blue is terrifying because it understands performance, celebrity, and identity in a way that feels even more relevant now. Mima has a public self, a private self, an image her fans want to preserve, and a new identity she is being pressured to create. The movie edits reality, memory, fantasy, and film scenes together so smoothly that the audience starts feeling the same confusion she does. It is one of the clearest examples of a movie where the mind breaks under the pressure of being watched. Then we have Jacob's Ladder from 1990. This movie follows Jacob Singer, a Vietnam veteran living in New York, who begins seeing disturbing visions. People's faces change, figures appear in shadows, and the world around him seems to be falling apart. At the same time, Jacob is dealing with trauma, grief, and memories of the war. Jacob's Ladder became famous for its nightmare imagery, especially the shaking head effect that influenced a lot of horror after it. But the movie is not just scary imagery. It is about a man caught between memory, guilt, pain, and something spiritual. The hospital scenes are especially intense, with hallways, doctors, and medical equipment turning into a kind of hell. The movie has a sad core beneath all the horror, and that sadness is why the ending stays with people. The last movie in Tier 3 is Possession from 1981. This is one of the most emotionally intense movies on the entire Iceberg. The story begins with a married couple, Mark and Anna, going through a brutal separation. At first, it seems like a relationship drama pushed into hysteria, but then the movie reveals something much stranger involving obsession, doubles, and a creature hidden away in an apartment. Isabelle Adjani's performance is famous for how extreme it is, especially the subway scene, where Anna has a breakdown that feels almost impossible to watch calmly. Possession feels off because every emotion is turned up past the normal limit. People scream, shake, laugh, cry, and collapse as if the end of a relationship has opened a hole in reality. It is messy, painful, and unforgettable. Tier 4. Deep Unsettling. Tier 4 is where the films become harder to casually recommend. The stories may still be understandable, but the tone gets heavier, colder, or more exhausting. These are movies that can leave you feeling strange for a while after they end. The first entry is Synecdoche, New York from 2008. This movie follows Caden Cotard, a theater director whose life slowly turns into a massive, impossible art project. He builds a huge replica of New York inside a warehouse and fills it with actors playing people from his life, then actors playing those actors, and eventually the project becomes so large that it swallows the line between art and life. Synecdoche, New York is not horror in the traditional sense, but it can feel terrifying because it deals with time, illness, aging, regret, and the feeling that life is slipping away while you are still trying to understand it. The movie gets sadder and stranger as it goes. People age, relationships fade, names and roles blur, and Caden keeps trying to make something complete while his own life keeps falling apart. It is one of those movies that can make you feel small in a very quiet way. Next is Eraserhead from 1977. This is David Lynch's first feature film, and it might be the purest example of nightmare logic in his career. The movie follows Henry Spencer, a nervous man living in a bleak industrial world who becomes responsible for a strange, sickly, baby-like creature. The story is simple when summarized, but the experience of watching it is completely different. The sound design is full of hums, hisses, and mechanical noise. The rooms feel dirty and airless. The baby's cries are unbearable. The lady in the radiator appears like someone from a dream you cannot explain. Eraserhead feels like anxiety about parenthood, sex, responsibility, and being trapped in a life you do not understand. It is slow, strange, and uncomfortable, but it has a way of getting into your head because every image feels like it came from somewhere deeply private. After that is Dogtooth from 2009. This Greek film follows a family where the parents have raised their children in complete isolation from the outside world. The children are adults, but they have been taught false meanings for words, false rules about reality, and bizarre fears about what exists beyond their home. The movie is disturbing because the family's world has its own logic, and everyone inside it behaves as if that logic is normal. The parents control language, sexuality, movement, and knowledge. A simple word can mean something completely different because the children have never been allowed to know better. Dogtooth has a very dry, flat style, which makes the disturbing parts feel even stranger. It does not beg the audience to react. It just shows the family system working, and that calm presentation makes the whole thing more uncomfortable. Next is Antichrist from 2009. This movie follows a grieving couple who retreat to a cabin in the woods after the death of their child. The husband is a therapist and tries to treat his wife's grief, but their stay in the woods becomes increasingly violent, symbolic, and disturbing. Antichrist is one of Lars von Trier's most controversial films, and it is known for graphic content, but the movie also has a heavy emotional and psychological atmosphere. The forest is called Eden, but it feels hostile from the moment they arrive. Animals appear in strange, symbolic ways, grief turns into rage, and the relationship becomes a battlefield. It is the kind of movie that people often remember through a few shocking scenes, but the real discomfort comes from how grief is treated like something that grows teeth. Then we have The House That Jack Built from 2018. This is another Lars von Trier film, and it follows Jack, a serial killer, as he recounts several murders from his life. The movie is framed like a conversation between Jack and a mysterious figure named Verge, and Jack talks about murder, art, architecture, and his own ego. The film is disturbing because it spends so much time inside Jack's perspective, letting him explain himself while also showing how empty and monstrous he is. The movie has moments of dark comedy, but the violence is ugly, and the character's self-importance becomes more and more grotesque. The final section turns into something closer to a journey through hell, which gives the movie a strange, mythic ending after so much grounded cruelty. It is not an easy watch, and a lot of people will know pretty quickly whether they want to keep going. The last movie in Tier 4 is Climax from 2018. This film follows a group of dancers at a rehearsal party in an empty school building. At first, the movie is full of movement, music, and personality, especially during the long dance sequence near the beginning. Then, someone spikes the sangria with LSD, and the night turns into panic, paranoia, violence, and chaos. Climax works because the camera keeps moving with the characters, so the viewer feels trapped in the building as the situation breaks down. The music keeps playing, people start accusing each other, and the group energy becomes dangerous. Gaspar Noé has a very confrontational style, and here he uses it to make the movie feel like a party that curdles into a nightmare. The longer it goes, the less control anyone has, and the whole thing becomes exhausting in a way that feels intentional. Tier 5, Reality Breakdown. Tier 5 is where normal storytelling starts falling away. These movies often have plots, but the plot may not be the main thing you remember. You remember images, rhythms, colors, sounds, and the feeling of being trapped inside a movie that does not care if you keep up. The first entry is Inland Empire from 2006. This is one of David Lynch's most difficult films, and it runs for about 3 hours while moving through Hollywood, identity, performance, jealousy, dreams, and digital video nightmares. Laura Dern plays an actress named Nikki who gets cast in a movie that may be cursed or connected to an earlier unfinished production. From there, the movie starts folding into itself. Nikki becomes confused with the character she is playing. Scenes shift locations and tones without warning. There are sitcom rabbits, strange rooms, repeated phrases, and faces that look especially unsettling because of the digital camera. Inland Empire feels like walking through someone else's nightmare while they keep changing the doors behind you. It is long, messy, and hard to explain, but Laura Dern's performance gives it an emotional center even when the story seems to dissolve. Next is Begotten from 1990. This is one of the most visually extreme experimental films on the list. The image is high contrast black and white, scratched and distorted until it looks ancient, damaged, and almost buried. The movie has no normal dialogue, and it presents a series of ritualistic, violent, symbolic images involving figures often interpreted as God, Mother Earth, and other mythic presences. Begotten is the kind of film people usually encounter through screenshots first, because the images look so strange that they feel like something found in a forbidden archive. Watching the whole thing is a different experience. It is slow, harsh, and difficult to process. There is a feeling of creation, suffering, death, and rebirth, but the movie does not guide the viewer with a normal story. It feels like watching a myth from a culture that never existed. After that is Tetsuo, the Iron Man, from 1989. This movie is pure body horror acceleration. Metal begins taking over the body, the editing becomes frantic, and the sound pounds away until the movie feels like machinery having a panic attack. Tetsuo is short, but it feels much bigger because it never really relaxes. The black and white photography, the stop-motion effects, the industrial locations, and the screaming performances all create a movie that feels physically aggressive. A lot of films are weird because the plot is confusing. Tetsuo is weird because the experience itself is overwhelming. It takes fears about the body, technology, sex, and urban life, then crushes them together into a metal nightmare. Next is Enter the Void, from 2009. This movie follows Oscar, a young man living in Tokyo, and after a violent event early in the story, the film shifts into a floating perspective that moves through memory, death, neon lights, and the spaces between people. The camera often feels like it is drifting above or through the city, and the movie uses bright colors, drug imagery, and long movements to create a very specific experience. Enter the Void is ambitious and exhausting. It is about life, death, childhood trauma, siblings, reincarnation, and the idea of consciousness floating after the body is gone. Some viewers find it hypnotic, while others find it unbearable, and both reactions make sense. The movie is long and intense, but when it works, it feels less like watching a story and more like being pulled through someone's final memories. Then we have Mother from 2017. This movie starts with a couple living in an isolated house. The husband is a writer, the wife is trying to restore the home, and then strangers begin arriving. At first, it is just uncomfortable. People enter the house and behave rudely. They ignore boundaries, touch things, and refuse to leave. Then more people arrive, and the situation grows into complete chaos. Mother is built as an allegory, but even without reading into every symbol, the movie is stressful because it understands the panic of having your space invaded. Jennifer Lawrence's character keeps trying to keep the house together, while everyone around her uses it, damages it, and treats her like she is unreasonable for being upset. By the final stretch, the movie has escalated so far that it feels like a nightmare about being overwhelmed by the entire world at once. The last Tier 5 entry is The Holy Mountain from 1973. This is an Alejandro Jodorowsky film, and it is one of the most famous surreal cult movies ever made. The movie follows a thief-like figure who meets an alchemist and joins a group of powerful people on a spiritual journey toward a mountain that may hold the secret of immortality. But the plot is only part of it. The movie is full of strange ceremonies, religious imagery, satire, costumes, animals, colors, and symbolic scenes that feel designed to shock and confuse in equal measure. The Holy Mountain feels like a spiritual quest made by someone who wanted every single frame to look impossible to forget. Some scenes are funny, some are disturbing, some are beautiful, and some are just bizarre. It belongs in Tier 5 because it does not behave like a normal movie at all, but it still has enough structure to guide you through its madness. Tier 6, the bottom. Now we are at the bottom. This tier is where the iceberg becomes experimental, abrasive, or extremely uncomfortable. Some of these are short films, some are underground horror, and some feel closer to movie nightmares than traditional movies. These entries are not all here because they are fun to watch. Some are here because they represent the point where the structure, comfort, or normal rhythm of cinema almost disappears. The first entry is Un Chien Andalou from 1929. This is a short surrealist film by Luis Buñuel and Salvador Dali, and it is one of the most famous experimental films ever made. It is only around 16 minutes long, but it contains images that people have remembered for almost a century. The most famous is the opening image involving an eye, which is still shocking even today. The film does not follow normal plot logic. Characters appear, actions happen, time jumps, and images connect through dream logic instead of cause and effect. Un Chien Andalou is important because it shows how far back this kind of off cinema goes. Long before modern mind-bending thrillers, filmmakers were already using movies to imitate dreams, impulses, and irrational thoughts. It is short, but it feels like the root of a lot of strange cinema that came after it. Next is Meshes of the Afternoon from 1943. This is another short experimental film, directed by Maya Deren and Alexander Hammond. It follows a woman moving through repeated images involving a key, a knife, a flower, a mirror-faced figure, and a house that seems to loop back on itself. The film is quiet, hypnotic, and deeply dreamlike. Unlike a lot of modern mind-bending movies, it does not explain its symbols or build toward a conventional reveal. It lets the repetition do the work. A simple action, like walking into a house or seeing an object on a table, becomes strange because it keeps returning in changed forms. Meshes of the Afternoon feels like being inside a private dream where every object has meaning, but the meaning stays just out of reach. It is one of the best examples of how a film can feel unsettling without needing monsters, gore, or dialogue-heavy explanation. After that is 964 Pinocchio from 1991. This is where we move from classic experimental film into Japanese cyberpunk chaos. The movie follows a discarded cyborg-like man who wanders through the city after being used and thrown away. He meets a homeless woman, and the film becomes a loud, fragmented story about control, identity, and the body breaking down. 964 Pinocchio is rough, messy, and overwhelming. People scream, run, collapse, and seem trapped in bodies they do not understand. The movie feels like it belongs to the same harsh underground world as Tetsuo, but it is even less polished and more frantic. The title references Pinocchio, which makes sense because the main character is a kind of artificial person trying to exist in the human world. But this version is not a fairy tale. It is dirty streets, body horror, confusion, and people coming apart in public. Next is Rubber's Lover from 1996. This is another Japanese cyberpunk horror film directed by Shozen Fukui, and it feels like being locked inside an experiment that has already gone wrong. The story involves psychic powers, human test subjects, machines, pressure, and people being pushed beyond what they can handle. It is shot in black and white, and it has a hard, industrial feeling that makes everything seem painful. Rubber's Lover is not a smooth movie, and that roughness is part of its identity. It has the feeling of a late-night underground film screening where the sound is too loud and the images are too harsh, but you keep watching because the whole thing has a strange power. Compared to the clean mind-benders at the top of the iceberg, this is much closer to sensory attack. It wants the viewer to feel trapped, pressured, and disoriented. Then we have August Underground from 2001. This is one of the most controversial and unpleasant entries on the iceberg, and it should be approached with caution. The movie is presented like found footage, following killers as they commit acts of violence. It is extremely graphic, intentionally ugly, and designed to feel like something you were never supposed to see. There is very little traditional storytelling, and the camera work makes it feel raw and degraded. August Underground has a reputation in extreme horror because of how committed it is to looking cheap, nasty, and real. A lot of viewers will have no interest in watching it, and that is completely understandable. Its place on this iceberg comes from how far it pushes discomfort and how much it removes the safety of normal movie presentation. At this level, the off feeling is not dreamy or stylish anymore. And that brings us to the bottom of the movies that feel off iceberg. What makes this kind of iceberg interesting is that the movies change in a very clear way as you move down. At the top, the films are popular, polished, and built around stories people can follow. Inception, Shutter Island, The Sixth Sense, Fight Club, and Black Swan all play with reality, but they still guide the audience carefully. They want you to be surprised, but they also want you to understand the journey. Then the middle tiers start becoming stranger. Enemy, Under the Skin, Mulholland Drive, Perfect Blue, Jacob's Ladder, and Possession are more unstable. They use doubles, dreams, trauma, memory, and identity collapse. You can still talk about the plot, but the feeling becomes just as important as the explanation. By the time we get into Eraserhead, Begotten, Inland Empire, Tetsuo, The Holy Mountain, and the bottom tier experimental films, the normal rules are mostly gone. These movies are not always trying to entertain in the usual way. Some are trying to disturb you. Some are trying to confuse you. Some are trying to show dreams, rituals, breakdowns, or nightmares without translating everything into normal story language. That is why movies like this stick with people. A normal, confusing movie can be solved, and once it is solved, the mystery is over. But a movie that truly feels off can stay with you because the feeling does not end when the credits roll. You remember a hallway, a face, a line of dialogue, a strange noise, a room that felt wrong, or an ending that made you sit there for a few seconds before moving. Some movies want you to understand them right away. These movies make you carry them around for a while. I'll be honest, some of those films at the bottom of the iceberg are definitely not my cup of tea. I much prefer films like Donnie Darko and Mulholland Drive, where the movie bends your mind without making you feel like you need to take a shower afterward. Researching some of the more obscene and offensive films was genuinely disturbing, and a few of them left a pretty bad taste in my mouth. But I guess that also shows how wide cinema can be, and how far people are willing to push what can even be considered a movie. Some of these films are beautiful, some are brilliant, some are just unpleasant. But when you make a video called the Mindfuck Movies Iceberg, I guess this is the kind of place you eventually end up. I really don't recommend a lot of those movies at all, to be honest. The ones I do recommend are the ones I mentioned earlier: Donnie Darko, Mulholland Drive, Fight Club, Inception, Enemy, and Shutter Island. Those are the ones that mess with your head in a way that's actually enjoyable. But hey, that's just my 2 cents. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, that is a lot of watching. So I appreciate you sticking with me. If you enjoyed this and want more videos like this, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. See ya.